Welcome to the Mind Vault. If you've ever wondered why you do what you do, this channel is for you. We unlock the psychology behind your patterns, habits, and thoughts.
Have you ever just looked around and felt like something is deeply, deeply wrong with the world today? I mean, for all our progress, it feels like we're getting sicker, more anxious, more disconnected. We get told a very specific story about why we feel this way. But what if that story is a lie? And what if that lie is actually the most dangerous part of the whole disease?
All right, let's just jump right into the deep end with a quote that's pretty hard to shake. More than half a century ago, the psychologist Carl Jung came to a stunning conclusion. Most people in modern society were, in his words, psychologically sick. Now, this wasn't some fringe opinion. This was coming from a man who dedicated his entire life to the human psyche. And if he saw us flirting with madness way back then, you gotta wonder, where does that leave us now?
So it really forces you to ask the big questions. Why? Why are so many of us struggling? We're gonna dig into a pretty radical idea here, that the story we're all told about our suffering isn't just wrong, it's the very thing that might be keeping us sick.
So first, let's break down that official story. You know, the one that's become so common, so accepted, that we almost never think to question it.
This story has a name. It's called the biomedical model. And it basically tells us that our anxiety, our depression, all of our despair, it's just a malfunction, a bug in the system, a simple chemical imbalance in your brain that just needs to be fixed, usually with a pill. It's a very simple, very neat, and a very, very dangerously incomplete picture.
The story we're told makes you a passive victim of your own biology. It's not your fault. It's just a chemical error. But what if the truth is the complete opposite? What if your suffering isn't some random defect at all, but a meaningful signal, a desperate message from deep inside you, screaming that something in your life has to change, and it has to change now?
And that leads us to a really critical and kind of counterintuitive idea. The secret purpose of our pain. What if our constant attempts to run away from suffering are the very thing that's making us sick?
There was a psychiatrist, M. Scott Peck, who put this brilliantly. He said there are two kinds of suffering. First, there's legitimate suffering. That's the necessary pain we feel when we actually confront our problems head-on. That pain helps us grow. But then there's neurotic suffering. That's the chronic depression and anxiety that piles up when we avoid our problems. When we try to numb ourselves to that legitimate pain, we get trapped in neurotic pain, and our personal growth just grinds to a halt. We get stuck.
This completely reframes how we think about something like depression, doesn't it? Jung suggests that instead of seeing it as a disease we have to stamp out, maybe it's an initiation. Maybe it's a sign that your old self, your old way of living, just isn't working anymore, and something new is trying to be born. It's not the end. It's the dark prelude to a total renewal.
So if our pain is really a call to change, what is it that needs to change? Well, a lot of the time, the real source of the pain is a deep conflict inside us. It comes from having to face the parts of ourselves we've spent a lifetime running from. It's what Jung famously called the shadow.
So what is the shadow? It's Jung's term for everything we've disowned about ourselves. It's that metaphorical bag we carry where we stuff all the traits we find unacceptable. Our anger, our envy, our weaknesses. We hide it all away, not just from other people, but from our own conscious minds. We create this perfect public mask. But that kind of self-deception, it comes at a huge cost.
Because here's the thing about the shadow. Just because you ignore it doesn't mean it goes away. In fact, as Jung warns us, the more you push it down and repress it, the more powerful and destructive it becomes. It doesn't just disappear. It goes into the basement and starts running your life from the dark, sabotaging you in ways you don't even understand.
And here is the absolute crucial point. Confronting your shadow isn't just about admitting you have flaws. It's about reclaiming your power. Because hidden in that darkness, right alongside your weaknesses, are your buried strengths, your healthy aggression, your creative impulses, your gut instincts, your authenticity. To become whole, you have to go into the dark and bring it all back.
But you know, it's really hard to try and integrate your true self when you're living in a world that seems to demand the exact opposite.
Our personal sickness doesn't just happen in a bubble. It's happening inside a society that often feels just as fragmented and inauthentic as we do.
The thinker Ian McGilchrist has this fascinating idea that our whole modern culture has created a kind of societal brain imbalance. We've started to overvalue this very narrow, cold, analytical way of seeing things, a worldview that sees everything as just a thing to be controlled or a problem to be fixed. And this way of thinking slowly disconnects us from the richness of real life, from each other, and from our own deepest feelings.
And on top of that, you have a culture that breeds narcissism. It screams at us that our value comes from our looks, our status, our stuff. But for most of us, those are impossible standards to meet, and that creates this profound sense of shame. So what do? We run from the shame by building a fragile, false self, often on social media, propped up by debt and illusion. And that just pushes us even further from who we really are.
And maybe the most dangerous piece of all is the collapse of real community, which has left us with an epidemic of loneliness. This is something the philosopher Hannah Arendt gave a chilling warning about. She argued that when people become isolated and lonely on a mass scale, they become powerless. They lose their sense of belonging, and they become incredibly vulnerable, desperate to latch onto any mass movement, any ideology that promises to cure that awful feeling of being alone.
So if the official story of mental illness is a lie, and if our inner lives and our outer world are both so out of balance, what's the way forward? Where do we go from here? Well, it's not easy, but there is a path.
Jung called this path individuation, and it's really the ultimate healing journey. It's the process of consciously putting yourself back together, integrating all the parts of you, the light and the shadow, to become the whole, unique individual you were always meant to be. And it takes real courage, the courage to stop conforming to a sick world and to finally follow your own path.
So, how do you even begin? The path we've just walked through really has 4 key steps. First, you have to reject the lie. Stop seeing yourself as a helpless biological victim. Second, you have to embrace legitimate suffering and see it as the engine for your own growth. Third, you get to know your own shadow. You go into the dark to reclaim your lost potential. And finally, number 4, you find the courage to choose your path, to be an individual, even if it means you have to walk alone for a little while.
And get this is not just some abstract psychological theory. It's incredible, but studies on people who have spontaneously recovered from chronic physical diseases often find one thing in common: a profound psychological shift right before they got better. These patients talk about suddenly rejecting their old, limited personality and embracing a much more authentic, autonomous way of being. It just shows you how deeply connected our psychological health is to our physical health.
I want to leave you with this one last powerful thought from Jung. He argued that if you want to stand firm against the pressures of a sick world, if you want to avoid just being swallowed up by the crowd, you have to be anchored in something transcendent, something bigger than your own ego. He said the individual who is not anchored in God can offer no resistance. Now, whether you call that anchor God or your deepest values or truth or love, the question he leaves us with is the same. What anchors you?
If this opened your eyes, imagine what else is hiding in your mind. Don't forget to subscribe for weekly episodes that decode your brain, one pattern at a time. And if something clicked today, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, stay curious.